You expect a wedding to be a sanctuary of blessings, but my mother treated mine like a public execution before 200 guests. She gripped the microphone like a weapon, and in 30 seconds, she branded me a gold digger while the room sat in frozen silence. She had no idea my husband was holding the nuclear option in his pocket. When his phone screen lit up the room, 6 people fled in tears, finally seeing the monster she truly was. My name is Lucy Howard, and for 32 years, I have trained myself to exist in the background. I am not the girl who demands the spotlight, and I am certainly not the woman who dreams of a fairy tale wedding where the universe revolves around her for 24 hours. I am practical. I am a survivor. I pay my bills on time. I keep my head down, and I solve problems before they become disasters. But standing there in my white dress, surrounded by 200 guests in a ballroom that smelled of expensive lilies and roast beef, I made the fatal mistake of letting my guard down. I actually thought I had made it across the finish line. The reception was in full swing. The clinking of silverware against china had settled into a comfortable rhythm, and the low hum of conversation felt warm and safe. I looked over at my husband, Ethan Hale. He was 35, handsome in that quiet, steady way that does not need to shout for attention. He was loosening his tie just a fraction, smiling at something his best friend was whispering. For the first time in my life, I felt a profound sense of peace. The war was over. I had escaped the house I grew up in. I had built a career, and I had found a man who loved the real version of me, not the distorted caricature my mother had painted for decades. Then the DJ lowered the music. I felt the temperature in the room drop before I even saw her. My mother, Marla Howard, was standing by the head table. She was wearing a dress that was just a shade too close to white, shimmering under the crystal chandeliers. She held the microphone with a grip that turned her knuckles white, but her face was composed into a mask of tragic bravery. "I just wanted to say a few words for my daughter," she said. Her voice trembled perfectly. It was a tone I knew better than my own heartbeat. It was the tone she used right before she destroyed something I loved. Ethan reached for my hand under the table, his thumb brushing against my wrist. He knew. He knew everything about her, or at least, he knew enough to hate her. But even Ethan could not have predicted what she was about to do. Marla smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She looked out at the crowd, at my friends, my colleagues, and Ethan's bewildered family. "Everyone tells you that a wedding is a beginning," Marla said, her voice growing stronger. "But as a mother, I feel I have a moral duty to speak the truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." The room went deadly silent. A waiter stopped midway through pouring wine. "I love Lucy," Marla continued, pacing slightly like a lawyer in a courtroom. "I love her enough to stop her from making a mistake based on lies. You see, Ethan is a good man, a successful man, and I cannot sit here and watch him be trapped by a woman who has spent her entire life deceiving the people closest to her." My breath hitched in my throat. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to tackle her. But my body was frozen in the chair. It was the old paralysis, the conditioning of a childhood spent learning that fighting back only made the punishment worse. Marla turned to look directly at Ethan, her expression shifting to one of pity. "She is not who you think she is." "Ethan," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone amplified to every corner of the hall. "She has hidden debt. She has a history of instability that we have tried so hard to manage as a family. She trapped you because she needs someone to pay for the mess she has made of her life. I am doing this because I respect you too much to let you sign your life away to a fraud." There were gasps, actual, audible gasps. I saw my boss exchange a look with his wife. I saw Ethan's mother bring a hand to her mouth. The humiliation was a physical thing, a wave of heat that started in my chest and burned its way up to my hairline. She was stripping me naked in front of everyone I knew. She was rewriting my history in real time, turning me into a villain in my own love story. I looked at Marla, pleading silently for her to stop. But she was not looking at me. She was glowing. This was her moment. This was the destruction of Lucy Howard, a public execution disguised as maternal concern. Then, the chair beside me scraped against the floor. Ethan stood up. He did not look angry. That was the thing that terrified me the most in that split second. If he had been red-faced and shouting, I would have understood. But Ethan was terrifyingly calm. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at my mother with the same expression one might use when looking at a fascinating, venomous insect. He walked toward the stage. Marla faltered for a second, surprised by his movement, but she held her ground, clutching the microphone like a shield. "Sit down, Ethan," she hissed, moving the mic away so only he could hear. "I am trying to save you." Ethan ignored her. He did not try to take the microphone from her hand. He did not engage in a tug-of-war. Instead, he walked past her, straight to the audio-visual station where the DJ stood looking paralyzed with awkwardness. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket. It was a black, sleek device that he treated with the reverence of a religious artifact. He plugged it into the main HDMI cable that controlled the massive projector screen behind the head table. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on him. Ethan turned back to the crowd. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Marla. "You are right." "Marla?" Ethan said. His voice was not amplified, but in the silence. It carried clearly. "Secrets are toxic, and I think everyone here deserves to see the full picture." He tapped the screen of his phone, the massive projection screen behind us, which had been cycling through innocent photos of our dating life, blinked black for a second. Then, it illuminated the room with a harsh, white light. Marla turned around. I saw the color drain from her face so fast, it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The image on the screen was not a photo, it was a document, and next to it was a timestamp. I watched my mother's knees buckle. She reached out to grab the edge of the table, her fingernails scratching against the tablecloth. But to understand why that image made her look like she had seen a ghost, and to explain why 6 people would stand up and leave this room in tears within the next 5 minutes, I have to take you back. I have to tell you about the day I started to suspect that my mother was not just difficult, but that she was a criminal. To understand the explosion at my wedding, you have to understand the silence that came before it. For most of my life, I lived inside a reality that my mother, Marla, constructed brick by brick. The mortar holding it together was a single, devastating sentence she repeated until it became the soundtrack of my existence. "You are too sensitive. Lucy, you always exaggerate." Growing up, I was never just a child who lost a toy or scraped a knee. I was the dramatic one. I was the difficult one, if I cried because my feelings were hurt. Marla would sigh with the exhaustion of a saint burdened with a sinner and tell anyone within earshot that I was going through a phase. She was the patient, long-suffering mother, polishing her halo in the grocery store aisle while I stood there, red-faced and confused, wondering why my sadness was treated like a performance. The disconnect between who my mother was in public and who she was in our kitchen was so sharp it could cut glass. To the neighbors, the church group, and the PTA, Marla was a force of benevolent nature. She baked casseroles for sick friends. She remembered birthdays. She was the woman everyone called when they needed advice. But the moment the front door clicked shut and the deadbolt slid home, the warmth evaporated. Her eyes, so crinkled with laughter outside, would flatten into hard, assessing discs. She would critique my posture, my grades, or my friends with a surgical precision that left no bruises but shattered my confidence completely. She needed a contrast to make her narrative work, so she created one. My cousins were always the golden standard. They were described as grateful and well-behaved. They did not ask questions. They did not talk back. If I asked why I could not go on a school trip when there was clearly money for her new curtains, I was labeled ungrateful. I was compared to my cousin Sarah, who apparently never asked for anything and was happy with whatever scraps of affection she received. I learned very quickly that to be good was to be silent. To be loved was to be convenient. This dynamic bled into money, which was always a misty, shapeless thing in our house. It was a fog I was not allowed to walk through. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. My grandmother had sent a card with a $50 bill inside. To a 10-year-old, $50 was a fortune, a ticket to freedom in the form of comic books and candy. I showed it to Marla, beaming. She smiled, took the bill from my hand, and tucked it into her pocket. "I will put this in your savings account," she said. "It is for your college fund. You will thank me later." When I asked about it a week later, she looked at me with genuine confusion. "What $50? You must be imagining things." "Lucy, Grandma sent a check, and I already deposited it. Stop making up stories." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I knew I had held the crisp paper bill. I knew I had seen the face of Ulysses S. Grant, but the conviction in her voice was so absolute that I began to rewrite my own memory. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had dreamt it. That was her greatest trick. She did not just steal my money. She stole my trust in my own mind. As I got older, the stakes got higher. When I was 16, I spent a sweltering summer working at a local ice cream parlor. My arms were constantly sticky with syrup, and my feet throbbed after 8-hour shifts. I was proud of that money. I had plans for it. But because I was a minor, my bank account was a joint custody arrangement every time I went to check my balance. The numbers did not add up. $20 here, $40 there, small enough amounts that you might think you miscalculated, but consistent enough to bleed you dry. When I finally gathered the courage to bring it up, the kitchen became a theater. Marla did not get angry. That would have been too easy. Instead, she collapsed. She sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands, and wept. "After everything I do for you," she sobbed, her shoulders shaking, "I work myself to the bone. I handle all the bills, the mortgage, the groceries. And this is how you repay me? Accusing me of stealing? I moved some money to cover your insurance. Lucy, do you have any idea how expensive you are?" The guilt was immediate and crushing. I was a monster. Here was my mother, sacrificing her life for me, and I was counting pennies like a miser. I apologized profusely. I hugged her. I promised never to bring it up again, and in that moment, she won. She had trained me perfectly. Asking questions caused pain, so I stopped asking. I handed over my autonomy in exchange for peace. I carried this learned helplessness into my 20s. I assumed I was bad with money because Marla told me I was. I assumed I was disorganized because Marla said I was chaotic. I let her handle paperwork because I believed I was too incompetent to understand the fine print. But the crack in the armor appeared 3 years ago. On a humid Tuesday afternoon, I had come back to my childhood home to pick up some old winter coats I had left in the attic. Marla was out at a luncheon, holding court with her admirers. I was alone in the house, a rarity. On the kitchen counter, buried under a stack of catalogs and flyers, was an envelope. It had already been slit open. It was from a credit card company I did not recognize. The logo was unfamiliar, bright blue and aggressive, but through the plastic window of the envelope, I saw my name. Lucy Howard. I frowned. I did not have a credit card with that bank. I barely used credit cards at all, terrified of debt because Marla had always told me that debt destroys families. I pulled the letter out. It was a statement. The balance was nearly $4,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a wave of nausea. I must have been hacked. Someone must have stolen my identity. My first instinct was to call Marla. She would know what to do. She would fix it. But then my eyes drifted to the address field on the statement. It was not my apartment address. It was this house, my mother's house. For a moment, the world tilted on its axis. Why would a thief use my mother's address? It made no sense, unless the thief had a key, unless the thief lived here. I heard the garage door rumble open. Panic, sharp and electric, shot through me. I shoved the letter back into the envelope and buried it deep in the stack of mail. Exactly where I had found it, when Marla walked into the kitchen 5 minutes later, carrying grocery bags and humming a cheerful tune. I was standing by the sink, drinking a glass of water. My hands were trembling so hard I had to use both of them to hold the glass. "Hi, honey," she chirped, kissing my cheek. "You look pale. Are you eating enough? You know you get anemic when you do not take care of yourself." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the easy smile, the practiced concern, the utter lack of guilt, and for the first time, the voice in my head that said "you are imagining things" was silent. I was not imagining the letter. I was not imagining the balance. I left 10 minutes later, claiming a headache. I sat in my car around the corner, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she opened it for me to build my credit score. Maybe it was a mistake. I tried to rationalize it away because the alternative was too horrifying to contemplate. The alternative meant that the person who was supposed to protect me from the world was actually the one feeding me to the wolves. I drove home in a daze. The image of that blue logo burned into my retinas. I thought I just had a difficult relationship with my mother. I thought we just had personality clashes. Actually, it was a system. It was a calculated, decades-long architecture of control, and I was just beginning to see the blueprints. I met Ethan 2 years ago in the most unromantic setting imaginable. It was a Tuesday night at a community center basement where we were both volunteering for a local literacy program. There was no slow-motion entrance, no wind blowing through my hair, and certainly no instant spark that Hollywood tries to sell you. I was tired from a 10-hour shift, wearing a stained cardigan and trying to fix a jammed photocopier. Ethan was the guy who walked over, gently took the paper tray out of my hands, and fixed the machine in under 30 seconds without saying a word. He was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed about him, in a world, and a family, where the loudest voice always won. Ethan was a vacuum of calm. He was an archivist for a large historical museum, a job that required infinite patience and an obsession with detail. He did not speak to fill the silence. He spoke only when he had something that needed to be said. He was systematic in everything he did. From the way he organized his bookshelf to the way he tied his shoelaces. For someone like me, whose life felt like a constant frantic paddle to keep my head above water, his stability was not just attractive, it was intoxicating. As we started dating, Ethan began to notice the cracks in my life that I had plastered over with smiles and excuses. He was observant in a way that felt dangerous to me at first. He noticed that I would walk 20 blocks to save $2 on bus fare, yet I would get hit with a $35 overdraft fee the same week. He noticed that I was meticulous about turning off lights to save electricity, but I would panic and change the subject whenever a piece of mail looked official. One evening, about 4 months into our relationship, we were sitting on his couch looking at travel options for a weekend getaway. I was anxious, vibrating with that familiar low-level dread that always accompanied spending money. Ethan looked at me, his brow furrowed slightly. "Lucy, you are the most disciplined person I know. You pack your lunch every day. You have worn the same winter coat for 5 years. So why does your bank account seem to hemorrhage money in ways you cannot explain?" I froze. The shame was immediate, hot and sticky. It was the programming my mother had installed deep in my operating system. "I am just bad with numbers," I said, reciting the script. "I am scatterbrained. I forget to cancel subscriptions. I am just a mess." Ethan. He did not scold me. He did not sigh the way Marla did. He just looked at me with those steady, analytical eyes. "You are not a mess," he said firmly. "You manage a team of 12 people at work. You organize complex schedules. You are not stupid. Lucy, data does not lie, but variables do not just disappear without a cause." I pulled away, changing the subject to the weather, to the movie we wanted to see, to anything that would stop him from looking too closely at the chaotic ledger of my life. I was terrified he would see what my mother saw, that I was incompetent. Then came the dinner. 6 months in, I decided it was time for him to meet Marla. I was nervous, sweating through my dress as we drove to my childhood home. I prepped him like a lawyer prepping a witness. Be polite, eat whatever she cooks, compliment the house. Marla opened the door wearing a pastel apron and a smile that could have sold toothpaste. She was charming. I have to give her that. She ushered us in, fussing over Ethan, taking his coat, offering him a drink before he had even fully stepped inside. The house smelled of pot roast and lemon polish, the scent of a perfect, happy home. Dinner started well enough, but as the salad was cleared and the main course arrived, the interrogation began. It was subtle at first, wrapped in the guise of maternal interest. "So, Ethan," Marla said, pouring him more wine than he asked for. "An archivist? That sounds fascinating. Is there much of a future in that? I mean, financially speaking?" "It is a stable field," Ethan replied politely. "The museum is well endowed." "That is wonderful," Marla beamed. "Stability is so important. Lucy has always struggled with finding her footing. She needs someone strong. Do you own your own place, or are you renting?" I saw Ethan pause, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. He was not used to being audited over roast beef. "I own a condo in the city," he said. Marla's eyes lit up. "A condo? Fantastic. And the market is so good right now. You must have bought at the right time. Do you handle your own investments, or do you have a broker? You know, you have to be so careful these days. People try to trick you out of your hard-earned money." I tried to intervene. "Mom, let's not talk about money. It is boring." "Hush, Lucy," Marla said, waving a dismissive hand at me without looking away from Ethan. "I am just getting to know him. We are all adults here." "So, Ethan, do you keep your finances separate from your family? Or do you believe in shared assets?" Ethan set his fork down. He had been watching her the entire time, cataloging her questions, her body language, the way her eyes darted to my purse and then back to his watch. "I believe in total transparency." Ethan said slowly, "I document everything. Digital trails, backups, cloud storage. I think ambiguity is where mistakes happen. I like to know exactly where every penny goes. Down to the cent." For a split second, the mask slipped. Marla flinched. It was tiny, a micro-expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared. But I saw it. She looked like she had bitten into a lemon. The concept of a digital paper trail seemed to physically repel her. "Well, that sounds a bit obsessive." She laughed, but the warmth was gone from her voice. "You do not want to be a miser. Ethan, money is meant to be enjoyed, not hoarded in a spreadsheet." The rest of the dinner was tense, at least for me. Marla pivoted to stories about my childhood, focusing exclusively on moments where I had failed, broken something, or cost her money. She told the story of how I lost my retainer in 4th grade 3 times. She laughed, but the message to Ethan was clear. She is a liability. I am the victim. When we finally left, Marla walked me to the car while Ethan waited in the driver's seat. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and urgent. "He is not right for you," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "What?" I asked, startled. "Mom, he is wonderful. He is controlling." "Lucy," she hissed, "did you hear how he talked about money? Documenting everything, watching every penny? He is going to control your life. He will count the groceries you buy. He is dangerous. You need someone generous, not someone who acts like a forensic accountant. Break it off before you get trapped." I pulled my arm away, shaken. I got into the car and sat in silence as we drove away from the house. I felt sick. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was blind. Ethan drove for 10 minutes without speaking. The streetlights flickered over his face, casting long shadows. He looked thoughtful, not angry. "My mother thinks you are controlling." I blurted out, unable to hold it in. "She thinks you're going to trap me." Ethan signaled and turned onto the highway. He did not laugh. He did not get defensive. He just tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, processing the data he had just collected. "She asked me about my net worth 5 times in 2 hours," Ethan said quietly. "She asked about my credit score. She asked if I have access to your accounts. And when I mentioned that I keep detailed records, she looked like I had threatened her with a weapon." I looked at him, confused. What are you saying? Ethan glanced at me, and his expression was one of profound, sorrowful clarity. People who are honest love paper trails. Lucy, because it proves they are right. People who are dishonest hate them. He turned his eyes back to the road. I do not know what your mother is afraid of, he said, his voice dropping an octave. But I can tell you this with 100% certainty. That woman is terrified. My mother did not wait for the dust to settle after that disastrous dinner. In fact, she did not even wait for the engine of Ethan's car to cool down in our driveway. By the next morning, the campaign had begun. Marla was not just gossiping. She was building a fortress of lies to protect herself, and she was using the bricks of my character to do it. The phone calls started coming in from relatives I had not spoken to in months. They were not calling to catch up. They were calling to check on my mental state. My Aunt Linda, a woman who usually only called on holidays, rang me on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. Her voice was dripping with that specific kind of pity that feels more like an insult. Your mother tells me you are going through a hard time. Lucy, Linda said. She says you are making some rash decisions. We are all very worried about this man you are seeing. Marla says he is isolating you from the family. I felt the blood rush to my face. I tried to explain. I told her that Ethan was wonderful, that he was kind, and that Mom was just being overprotective. But Linda cut me off with a sigh that sounded exactly like my mother's. Honey, Marla knows you better than anyone, Linda said. She has sacrificed her whole life for you. If she says there is something wrong, there is usually a reason. You have always been a bit unstable with your choices. Just listen to her. I hung up, feeling like the walls were closing in. That was Marla's genius. She did not just lie to me. She enlisted an army of witnesses to validate her reality. She had planted the seeds of my incompetence for 30 years, and now she was harvesting the crop. If I fought back, I looked like the rebellious, ungrateful daughter she claimed I was. If I stayed silent, her narrative became the truth. I was trapped in a gaslighting network that spanned 3 counties. Ethan saw the toll it was taking on me. I was not sleeping. I was jumping every time my phone buzzed. One evening, he sat me down at our kitchen table. He had his laptop open, and his expression was gentle but serious. Lucy, he said softly, we need to look at the data. I am not asking you to accuse your mother of anything, but we need to pull your full credit report. We need to see what is attached to your Social Security number. I immediately recoiled. The idea of checking my credit report felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was sneaking around behind Marla's back, violating the sacred trust of the mother-daughter bond she preached about constantly. I cannot. I whispered, if she finds out I am checking, she will think I do not trust her. She will cry. She will say I am ungrateful. Ethan reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was warm and grounding. She does not need to know, he said, but you need to know. I might have continued to refuse, paralyzed by the guilt she had installed in me. If it were not for the notification that popped up on my phone 3 days later, it was an automated email from a home security company. It thanked me for my payment of $89 and confirmed that my service address had been updated. I stared at the screen. I did not have a home security system. I lived in a 3rd-floor apartment with a buzzer. My hands started to shake. I called the customer service number listed in the email, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I navigated the automated menu, pressing 0 until I got a human being. I am calling about a charge. I said, my voice trembling, I think there has been a mistake. I do not have an account with you. The representative asked for my Social Security number to verify my identity. I gave it to her. There was a pause, the sound of typing, and then she came back on the line. I see the account right here. Ms. Howard, she said cheerfully. It has been active for 4 years. The service address is 42 Oak Street. 42 Oak Street, my mother's house. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. And who is the authorized user? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The primary account holder is Lucy Howard, she replied, But there is a secondary contact listed. Marla Howard. She is listed as the billing manager. I thanked her and hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. My mother had opened a security account in my name 4 years ago. She had been using my credit to protect her house, paying the bill, or not paying it, whenever she felt like it. I pulled up my contacts and hovered my thumb over Marla's name. Rage, hot and blinding, flared in my chest. I wanted to call her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could look me in the eye and talk about trust while she was stealing my identity to install window sensors. But then, the other feeling hit me. The conditioning. I imagined her voice. I did it for us. Lucy, I could not get approved because of the divorce. I was trying to keep us safe. Why are you so selfish? Why do you care about a stupid account when I put a roof over your head? I could see her face crumpling into tears. I could feel the crushing weight of her martyrdom. My thumb froze. I could not press the call button. I was 32 years old, and I was terrified of making my mother cry, even when she was the one robbing me. I dropped the phone on the duvet and buried my face in my hands, sobbing not out of sadness, but out of sheer, impotent frustration. I felt the mattress dip beside me. Ethan. He did not say anything at first. He just rubbed my back, letting me cry until the tears ran out. She used my name, I choked out, for the alarm system. She has been doing it for 4 years. Ethan did not look surprised. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who had just confirmed a hypothesis. I know it hurts, he said. I cannot call her. I confessed, wiping my eyes. I cannot do it. Ethan, she will twist it. She will make it my fault. I am too weak. Ethan turned me around so I was facing him. He looked me dead in the eye. You do not have to fight her. Lucy, that is not your job right now. You are too close to it. You are in the blast radius. He picked up his laptop and set it on the bed between us. I do not need you to go to war, he said. I just need you to give me clearance. I need you to authorize me to do the digging. I will organize it. I will find the paper trail. You just have to say the word. I looked at the laptop, then at him. For the first time, I realized that I did not have to carry the burden of her deception alone. I had a partner, and he was not afraid of her tears. Okay, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan opened a blank spreadsheet. Okay, he repeated. Find it, the dining room table. Usually reserved for our quiet dinners or the occasional stack of mail, had been transformed into a war room. Ethan did not approach this emotionally. He approached it like he was curating an exhibit on the fall of the Roman Empire. He needed a timeline, a narrative arc constructed not of memories, but of hard, cold data. For 3 nights, the only sounds in our apartment were the clicking of keyboard keys and the hum of the printer. Ethan constructed a master timeline that spanned the last 12 years of my life. He plotted every major event, my high school graduation, my acceptance into college, my first internship, my first full-time job. Then, he overlaid a second layer of data, credit inquiries, bank withdrawals, and account openings. The visual representation was nauseating. It looked like a parasitic infection. Every time I had achieved a milestone of independence, a financial drain had appeared to pull me back down. When I got my first paycheck as a junior copywriter, a credit card was opened in my name 3 weeks later. When I received a small bonus at Christmas, the balance on a utility account I never knew existed was maxed out. It was not random bad luck. It was a rhythmic, predatory cycle. Ethan pointed to a cluster of activity from 7 years ago. Look at this, he said, his finger hovering over a date in late October. This is when your grandmother passed away, right? I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I remembered that time vividly, the grief, the funeral arrangements, and my mother's inconsolable sobbing. She had been so distraught that she could barely stand. According to the public records and the probate filing, Ethan said, his voice devoid of judgment but heavy with implication. There was a payout from a life insurance policy, not a fortune, but significant. About $15,000. I shook my head. No, That is wrong. Mom told me Grandma died with nothing but debt. She said the insurance barely covered the casket. I remember signing the paperwork to settle the estate because Mom was too emotional to hold a pen. Ethan stopped typing. He turned his chair to face me. You signed paperwork? He asked. Do you remember what it looked like? I closed my eyes, trying to transport myself back to that gray afternoon in the funeral home parking lot. It was hurried. I recalled. We were about to leave. Mom handed me a clipboard on the hood of her car. She said it was just a standard waiver to release the funeral home from liability or something administrative. She was crying, blowing her nose into a tissue, telling me to just sign it so we could go home and grieve. I did not read it. I just wanted to make her stop crying. Ethan nodded slowly. He did not say I was stupid. He did not ask why I had not read the fine print. He just picked up his phone. I'm going to make a call, he said. Ethan had spent a decade working in archives, and if there is one thing archivists know, it is how to find people who keep old paper. He tracked down the notary who had stamped the documents that year. It was a long shot, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had long since retired to Florida. But Ethan was persuasive. He explained that we were rectifying a clerical error for a family history project. He was charming, professional, and persistent. 2 days later, an email chimed on Ethan's laptop. It was a scanned PDF. Ethan opened it, then opened a second window on his screen where he had pulled up the document my mother had filed with the county, the one she claimed I had signed. Come here, Ethan said. I walked around the table and looked at the screen. On the left was the document my mother had filed. It was a waiver, disclaiming any right to the insurance payout, effectively funneling the money to the next of kin. Marla Howard. My signature was there, loopy and rushed, exactly as I remembered it. On the right was the document Mr. Henderson had sent from his personal archives, the carbon copy of what had actually been notarized that day. They were not the same document. The header on the original document did not say, Waiver of Beneficiary Rights. It said, Confirmation of Receipt. And in the body of the text, the payout amount was listed clearly, $15,000, payable to Lucy Howard. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process the disparity. She white-outed the header. Ethan explained, pointing to the faint, telltale smudge on the left document. She physically altered the text after you signed it, photocopied it to hide the alteration, and then filed the forgery. She did not just lie to you, Lucy. She stole $15,000 from her grieving daughter and forged a legal document to cover it up. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the chill of absolute realization. For years, I had thought my mother was just bad with boundaries, or maybe a little selfish. I had excused her behavior as love gone wrong, but this was not love. This was a felony. She had looked me in the face, tears streaming down her cheeks, and used my grief to rob me. The system I had lived in crumbled. I was not the disorganized one. I was not the one who was bad with money. I was the victim of a long con performed by the one person on earth who was supposed to protect me. Ethan did not give me time to spiral. He went into lockdown mode. He printed everything. He made 3 copies of the comparison. He saved the digital files to an external hard drive, then to a cloud server, and then he encrypted the folder. He drafted a detailed log, noting the dates, the metadata of the files, and the transcript of his conversation with the notary. He put 1 full set of the evidence into a manila envelope. I am sending this to a friend of mine from law school, he said, sealing the envelope with a decisive press of his hand, just for safekeeping. We are not filing charges yet, but we need this out of the house. We need an insurance policy against your mother. I sat in the chair, feeling small and fragile. What do we do now? I asked. Do we call the police? Do we cancel the wedding? Ethan looked at me. The anger that had been simmering under his calm exterior finally reached his eyes. It was a cold, hard resolve. No, he said. If we go to the police now, she will spin it. She will say you are confused, or that she was managing it for you because you were unstable. She will cry, and the family will believe her. She will make herself the martyr again. He placed his hand on the stack of evidence. We have the gun, Lucy, but we need her to pull the trigger. We need her to admit it, or at least, we need to catch her in a lie so big she cannot weep her way out of it, to end this properly, to make sure she never controls you again. She has to be the one to reveal herself. He looked at the calendar on the wall, where our wedding date was circled in red ink. We are going to let her think she has won, he said, and then we are going to ask her one simple question. The phone sat on the kitchen table like an unexploded ordnance. It was a simple device, a rectangular piece of glass and metal, but in that moment, it felt radioactive. We had the documents, we had the forged signature from the funeral home, we had the credit report stained with unauthorized inquiries. But Ethan, in his infinite methodical wisdom, knew that paper could be argued away in family court or dismissed as clerical errors by a mother who knew how to cry on cue. We needed the voice. We needed the intent. I sat in the hard wooden chair, my palms damp with sweat. My heart was doing something acrobatic in my chest, a frantic, tumbling rhythm that made it hard to breathe. It was not just fear. It was a regression. I was 32 years old, a manager at a marketing firm, a woman about to be married, but staring at that phone. I was 6 years old again, waiting for Marla to tell me I had done something wrong. Ethan sat across from me. He did not reach out to hold my hand this time. He knew that if he touched me, I might crumble. Instead, he offered me a different kind of support. Witness. He had placed his own phone on the table. The voice memo app open, the red recording bar pulsing silently. We had checked the laws in our state. As long as one party consented to the recording, it was legal. I was the consenting party. You do not have to fight her, Ethan reminded me, his voice low and steady. You just have to ask the question. Let her do the rest. I nodded, took a deep breath that tasted of stale coffee and anxiety, and pressed the call button. The ringing sound was loud in the quiet apartment. 1 ring, 2 rings, my stomach twisted. Part of me hoped she would not answer. Part of me wanted to delay the inevitable explosion. Hello? Her voice was bright, cheerful, utterly oblivious. It was the voice she used when she had an audience. Hi, Mom, I said. My voice sounded thin, stretched tight over my nerves. Lucy, I was just looking at the floral arrangements for the head table. The florist says lilies are in season. But I told her you prefer orchids. I think we should go with... Mom, I interrupted. I need to ask you something. There was a pause. The shift in her tone was subtle, a slight cooling of the temperature. What is it? You sound strange. Is everything okay with the dress? The dress is fine, I said, staring at Ethan. He gave me a small, encouraging nod. I wanted to ask you about some paperwork I found. Paperwork? She repeated. The word came out flat. I was going through my credit report with Ethan, I said, sticking to the script we had rehearsed. We found some accounts I do not recognize. There is a home security system registered in my name, and a credit card ending in 4529. Silence stretched across the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, calculating the distance between the lie and the discovery. Oh, that, she said dismissively. That must be a mistake. You know how banks are. They mix up files all the time. Remember when the water company billed us for the neighbor's usage? It is just a clerical error. Lucy, do not work yourself up. It is not a clerical error. Mom, I said, forcing my voice to remain even. The service address listed on the account is your house. The silence on the other end grew heavy. This was the moment where, usually, I would back down. I would accept the flimsy excuse to avoid the conflict. But I looked at the red bar pulsing on Ethan's phone, recording every second of this, and I found a reserve of courage I did not know I possessed. Why is my social security number attached to your alarm system? I asked. Marla's breath hitched. Then, the pivot came. It was sharp and violent. Is this what he is telling you? She snapped. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was jagged, Is this Ethan? I knew it. I knew he was digging around. He is trying to turn you against me. Lucy, he is putting ideas in your head. He is controlling you. He is not saying anything. I replied. I am reading the statement. Mom, it says Marla Howard is the secondary contact. You signed for it. I did not raise my voice. That was the key. Ethan had told me. Anger is her fuel. Do not give it to her. Marla let out a sob. It was a wet, ragged sound that would have broken my heart a week ago. Now, it just sounded like noise. I cannot believe this, she cried. After everything I have done for you, I raised you alone. I sacrificed my career, my social life, everything to make sure you had a good life. And now you are interrogating me over a bill? You are so ungrateful. Lucy, just like your father. The guilt hook. It was her favorite weapon. She cast it out, waiting for it to snag on my conscience. She waited for me to say, I am sorry. Mom, I did not mean it. Stop crying. But I did not say it. I sat there, looking at the wall, and I said absolutely nothing. The silence on the line was excruciating. It lasted for 5 seconds, then 10. It felt like an eternity. Marla was waiting for the apology. She was waiting for the dynamic to reset to its factory settings. But without my apology to fill the void, the silence became a vacuum. And Marla, who abhorred a vacuum, had to fill it. I was trying to help you, she burst out, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. I still did not speak. You cannot handle money. Lucy, she yelled. You never could. You spend it on nonsense. I opened those accounts to build your credit score because you were ruining it. I was protecting you from yourself. I felt a chill run down my spine. There it was, the partial admission. But it was not enough. You were protecting me by spending $3,000 on a security system for a house I do not live in? I asked quietly. I paid the bills, she screamed. Mostly. I am holding that credit for you. I am the only reason you have any financial standing at all. You should be thanking me. I manage everything because you are too weak to do it. I have to keep control of it, or you will lose everything. Ethan's eyes locked with mine. That was it. I manage everything. I have to keep control. So the accounts are yours? I asked. One final nail in the coffin. You open them? Yes, she shrieked. Yes, I open them, because I am your mother and I know what is best. And if you are going to let that man destroy our family over a few bills, then you are more lost than I thought. She was panting now, her rage spilling over the receiver. She had admitted it. She had admitted to opening accounts in my name without my consent, justifying it with her twisted logic of protection. I did not say anything else. I did not scream back. I did not tell her she was a criminal. Okay, Mom, I said, I have to go. Lucy, wait, do not you dare hang up on me. Lucy! I pressed the red button to end the call. The room fell instantly silent. The only sound was the blood rushing in my ears. I felt lightheaded, as if I had just stepped off a roller coaster that had been running for 30 years. Ethan reached out and tapped the stop button on his recording app. He saved the file, renamed it Marla Confession, February 9th, and uploaded it immediately to the cloud. He looked at me. His expression was a mix of pride and sorrow. He knew what it had cost me to make that call. He knew I had just severed the umbilical cord with a rusty knife. Did we get it? I asked, my voice trembling. We got it, Ethan said. She admitted to opening the accounts. She admitted to controlling your finances. She called it protection, but the law calls it identity theft. I slumped back in my chair, covering my face with my hands. I did not cry. I felt incredibly dry, like a husk. She really thinks she is the hero. I whispered, she truly believes she is saving me. That is what makes her dangerous, Ethan said. He stood up and walked around the table to stand behind me, placing his hands on my shoulders. He did not massage them. He just held them there, a solid, grounding weight. So, what now? I asked, looking up at him. Do we send it to the police? Ethan shook his head. Not yet, he said. If we arrest her now, the wedding is canceled. She becomes the victim in the eyes of your family. They will say we were cruel to do this right before your big day. They will say we staged it. He looked at the phone, then at the calendar on the fridge. We have the evidence. We have the confession. We have the leverage. Now, we wait. We let her come to the wedding. We let her think she is still in control. We let her make her speech. Why? I asked. Why wait? Because, Ethan said, his voice hard as flint. She is going to try to destroy you publicly. I know it. You know it. She cannot help herself. And when she does, we are not going to argue with her. We are just going to show everyone exactly who she is. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head. Enough, he said. The investigation is over. Now, we choose the moment. The final month before the wedding felt less like a celebration and more like the eerie calm before a hurricane makes landfall. I threw myself into the logistics of the event, obsessing over the texture of the napkins and the exact shade of ivory for the table runners. It was easier to worry about whether the beef would be overcooked than to focus on the radioactive secret Ethan and I were hoarding in a cloud server. But the most unsettling part was not the stress. It was my mother. After the phone call where she had practically admitted to identity theft, I expected war. I expected her to storm my apartment or bombard me with guilt-ridden texts. Instead, Marla transformed. She became the mother I had fantasized about in my darkest moments of childhood loneliness. She was helpful. She was agreeable. When I showed her the seating chart, which usually would have triggered a 3-hour lecture on family politics, she simply nodded and said that it looked perfect. She offered to pick up the favors. She drove 40 minutes to the bakery to confirm the cake design so I would not have to leave work early. It was terrifying. I watched her across the table at the rehearsal dinner venue, laughing softly at a joke my father-in-law made. She looked radiant, harmless, and utterly loving. A treacherous part of my brain began to whisper to me, maybe I was wrong. Maybe the phone call had just been a moment of panic. Maybe she really did love me and was just misguided. The little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her mommy to be proud, was desperate to drop the sword and run into her arms. Then came the request. We were standing in the parking lot of the florist shop, surrounded by buckets of hydrangeas. Marla reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Her touch lingering just a second too long. "Lucy," she said, her voice soft and trembling with emotion. "I know we have had our differences. I know I have been hard on you, but I want you to know how proud I am." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I would love to say a few words at the reception. She continued, her eyes glistening. "Just a toast, a mother's blessing for her daughter. Please, Lucy, let me do this one thing for you." I looked at her. I saw the tears in her eyes. I saw the vulnerability. And against every instinct of self-preservation I had developed over the last month, I nodded. "Okay, Mom," I said. "You can speak. Thank you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "You will not regret it." I drove home feeling a mix of relief and nausea. I told Ethan about the request that evening while we were packing the final boxes of decorations. He did not look relieved. He stopped taping a box and looked at me with a flatness that chilled me. "She is planning something," he said. "Ethan, she was crying." I argued, feeling the old defensive reflex kick in. She seemed genuine. Maybe she just wants to make peace. Ethan walked over to the closet and pulled out his laptop bag. He did not argue with me. He knew that I needed to believe in the fantasy of a good mother until the very last second. "I hope you are right," he said, "but we are going to be prepared." He sat down on the sofa and opened his laptop. He showed me a folder on his desktop labeled simply "The Truth." Inside were the scanned documents, the timeline, the bank statements, and the audio file of her confession. "I spoke to the DJ," Ethan said. "I told him we might have a surprise video presentation. He has set up an HDMI cable right next to the head table." I stared at the screen. The reality of what he was proposing hit me hard. "You want to humiliate her?" I asked. "No," Ethan replied firmly. "I want to prevent her from humiliating you. If she gets up there and gives a lovely, heartfelt toast, then this laptop stays in the bag. We never speak of it again. We deal with the financial theft quietly after the honeymoon. But if she tries to do what she always does, if she tries to paint you as the villain to save her own ego, then we do not argue, we do not scream, we just press play. I nodded slowly. It was a fair deal. It was a ceasefire with a nuclear deterrent. 2 days before the wedding, the cracks in Marla's facade began to show, though not to me directly. I received a call from my Uncle Jerry, my father's brother, who had maintained a polite but distant relationship with Marla since the divorce. "Lucy, I just wanted to give you a heads up," Jerry said, his voice low. "Your mother called me yesterday." "Oh?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Yeah. She was asking some odd questions. She wanted to know if I knew anything about Ethan's family trust. She asked if I knew whether the deed to your apartment was in both your names or just his." My stomach dropped. The warm, fuzzy feeling of the last 2 weeks evaporated instantly. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her it was none of my business and none of hers." Jerry said, "But Lucy, she sounded intense. She kept saying she needed to protect you. She said she found some things out. Just watch your back, kiddo." I hung up and sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by tulle and ribbon. She was not changing. She was researching. She was looking for ammunition. She was digging into Ethan's life, desperate to find a flaw, a debt, a secret, anything she could use to construct a narrative where he was the predator and she was the savior. She needed a reason to object, and since one did not exist, she was trying to manufacture one the night before the wedding. I stayed at a hotel near the venue. Ethan stayed at our apartment. Tradition said we were not supposed to see each other, but I felt an ache of separation that went deeper than superstition. I felt unsafe without him. I was lying in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The silence of the room was heavy. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I rolled over and squinted at the screen. It was a text message from an unknown number. The area code was local. "Are you sure you want to marry him? You do not know everything. He is hiding debt. Get out while you can." I stared at the words. The syntax was familiar. The phrasing was familiar. Hiding debt. It was the exact accusation she had hurled at me for years. It was the projection of her own sins onto everyone else. I did not reply. I knew who it was. It was not a concerned friend. It was not a secret lover. It was my mother, buying a burner phone or using an app, trying to plant a seed of doubt in my mind 12 hours before I walked down the aisle. She wanted me to panic. She wanted me to call off the wedding so she could comfort me, so she could be the shoulder I cried on, so she could say, "I told you so." I took a screenshot of the text and sent it to Ethan. His reply came back 10 seconds later. "Add it to the folder." I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The grief finally washed over me, heavy and suffocating. It was the grief of realizing that the mother I wanted did not exist. There was only Marla. And tomorrow, in front of 200 people, I would have to choose between protecting her lie or saving my own life. I pulled the duvet up to my chin. I was done hoping. I was ready for the speech. The reception hall was a masterpiece of illusion. 500 twinkling fairy lights draped from the ceiling like a captured galaxy, casting a soft, forgiving glow over the faces of our 200 guests. The air smelled of expensive prime rib and sugared almonds. For the first 2 hours, I actually let myself believe that the nightmare was over. I was Mrs. Ethan Hale. I was wearing a dress that cost $3,000 and made me feel like royalty. I was dancing with my husband, and the world felt steady beneath my feet. Marla was behaving with a terrifying level of perfection. She wore a floor-length champagne silk gown that shimmered under the lights. She moved through the crowd like a diplomat, touching arms, laughing at jokes, and accepting compliments on her daughter's big day with a gracious tilt of her head. Every time I looked at her, she smiled, a tight, practiced expression that did not quite reach her eyes, but to the untrained observer, it looked like maternal pride. Then came the toasts. The best man gave a speech that was appropriately embarrassing and touched with genuine affection. The maid of honor cried through her notes, making everyone laugh. Then, The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. And now, a special few words from the mother of the bride, Marla Howard. My stomach dropped through the floor. I looked at Ethan. He was not looking at the stage. He was looking at his phone, which was resting face down on the tablecloth next to his wine glass. His hand was hovering near it, not touching it, but ready. Marla walked to the microphone stand with the grace of a swan. She adjusted the height, waited for the applause to die down, and looked directly at me. "Lucy looks beautiful tonight, doesn't she?" she began, her voice warm and rich. Applause rippled through the room. "I remember when she was a little girl." Marla continued. "She always had such a vivid imagination. She would tell stories that were so elaborate, so detailed, that you almost wanted to believe them. She was always creative with the truth." The room chuckled politely. It sounded like a gentle roast, but I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The pivot was coming. But as a mother, Marla's voice dropped an octave, becoming serious, heavy with concern. "There comes a time when you have to stop protecting your children from their own fantasies and start protecting the people they might hurt." The room went quiet. The chuckle died instantly. "I look at Ethan," she said, turning her body toward the groom's side of the room. "A good man, a hard-working man, a man who has built a life on integrity, and I cannot, in good conscience, let him enter this marriage without knowing exactly who he is marrying." The silence was now absolute. A waiter dropped a fork in the back of the room, and it sounded like a gunshot. "Lucy has struggled her whole life with honesty," Marla said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "She has hidden debts. She has a history of financial instability that I have spent decades covering up. She is not the independent woman she pretends to be. She is a trap." "Ethan." I felt the blood drain from my face. I could not breathe. I could not move. It was happening. She was doing exactly what she had done in our kitchen, exactly what she had done on the phone, but this time she was doing it in front of my boss, my college roommate, and Ethan's conservative parents. "She has trapped you." "Ethan," Marla said, wiping a tear from her cheek, "I love my daughter, but I love the truth more. She's hiding thousands of dollars in debt she expects you to take on. She's lied to you about her past. She's lied to you about who she really is. And if you sign that marriage license, you're handing over your future." She scanned the crowd, palms turned up in that helpless, martyr-like display. "I'm sorry to ruin the party," she sobbed, "but someone had to save him." The room locked up. Ethan's mother looked sick with shock. One hand clamped over her mouth. My cousins stared hard at their plates. Shame became something with weight, something that pressed on my ribs and stole the air from my lungs. I wanted to vanish. I wanted the lights to dim and the moment to slide past without me in it. I was the little girl who stole the money. I was the liar. I was the burden. Then Ethan's hand closed over mine. It wasn't a soothing squeeze. It was a cue. He stood. He didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked like he was about to deliver a calm lecture on archival preservation techniques. He buttoned his suit jacket with one hand and picked up his phone with the other. He walked toward the stage. Marla watched him come, her eyes widening slightly. She expected him to yell. She expected him to defend me so she could talk over him. She expected a fight. She did not expect him to walk right past her. Ethan went straight to the audiovisual table. The DJ looked at him with wide, panicked eyes. But Ethan simply reached out and took the HDMI cable that was resting on the console. He plugged it into his phone, the large projection screen behind the head table, which had been displaying a slideshow of our engagement photos, flickered to black. Ethan turned to face the room. He did not use a microphone. He did not need one. "Marla says Lucy is a liar," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. He looked at Marla, who was still clutching the microphone, looking confused. "She says Lucy has a history of financial instability. She says she is protecting me." He tapped his phone screen. A document appeared on the massive screen behind him. It was 10 feet tall. "So I think it is only fair that we look at the evidence," Ethan said. The image on the screen was the side-by-side comparison of the funeral home document. On the left was the forgery my mother had filed, the one where she claimed I had waived my rights to my grandmother's insurance. On the right was the original, notarized document Ethan had retrieved from Mr. Henderson, showing the $15,000 payout that was supposed to go to me. The dates were highlighted in bright yellow. The signatures were magnified. "What is this?" Marla whispered into the microphone, her voice amplified and shaky. "This," Ethan said, pointing to the screen, "is the insurance payout from Lucy's grandmother, the one you told Lucy did not exist, the one you forged her signature to steal." A gasp rippled through the room. It was a collective intake of breath from 200 people simultaneously realizing they were witnessing a crime scene. Ethan swiped his finger across the phone. The image changed. Now, a spreadsheet appeared. It showed a list of credit card accounts and the home security system registered to my name, with the service address listed as Marla's house. "And these," Ethan continued, his voice devoid of mercy, "are the accounts you opened in Lucy's name, the ones you used to ruin her credit score so she would remain dependent on you, the ones you just accused her of hiding." Marla's face turned the color of ash. She stepped back, bumping into the microphone stand. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that matched the panic in her eyes. "That is fake!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "He is making it up. It is Photoshop." Ethan did not argue. He just tapped the screen one more time. The video file icon appeared. He pressed play. The audio was crisp and clear. It was the recording from the phone call we had made 2 weeks ago. My voice filled the room, asking about the accounts. And then, Marla's voice, unmistakable and loud, boomed through the speakers. "Yes, yes, I opened them, because I am your mother and I know what is best." The recording echoed off the walls. "Yes, I opened them." Marla stood center stage, stripped naked of her lies. There was nowhere to hide. The dutiful mother mask had not just slipped. It had been incinerated. She looked at the crowd. She looked at her sister, who was standing up slowly, looking sick. She looked at me. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, lunging toward Ethan. "Turn it off right now!" But Ethan did not move. He just stood there, guarding the truth, while the image of the forged document burned bright and unyielding on the screen behind him. The wedding was over. The trial had begun. You might think that after the first blow, Ethan would have stopped. Most people would have considered the point made. The forgery was on the screen. The room was silent, and my mother was trembling in her champagne silk gown. But Ethan understood something about Marla that I had only just begun to grasp. You do not wound a predator and then turn your back. If he stopped now, she would claim the document was a misunderstanding. She would spin a story about how she had intended to give me the money later, about how I was too immature to handle $15,000 at the time. She would find a way to make herself the victim. So Ethan did not stop. He did not even blink. He swiped his finger across the phone screen, and the projection shifted again. It was a timeline, a visual representation of the financial parasitism that had defined my adult life. It did not stop with the insurance money, Ethan said, his voice level and devoid of malice. He was not shouting. He was presenting a dissertation on betrayal. The screen filled with a cascade of bank statements. They were highlighted in neon yellow. January 12th, 2 years ago. Ethan read from the screen. Lucy received a bonus from her firm, $500. 2 days later, a withdrawal of $500 was made from the joint account Marla insisted on keeping open for emergencies. He swiped again. March 4th. Lucy saves for a deposit on her apartment. The account is drained of $1,200. Marla claims it was a bank fee. Here is the transaction record. It was a transfer to a generic account ending in 339. He tapped the screen, revealing the owner of the account ending in 339, Marla Howard. The room was so quiet that the hum of the projector fan sounded like a jet engine. "And just so we are clear on the intent," Ethan said, looking directly at the guests, "let us listen to the rest of the call." He pressed play again. My mother's voice, shrill and defensive, tore through the elegant ballroom. "I managed it because she is incompetent. I am keeping it safe. If she had it, She would just waste it. Marla let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She lunged toward the AV table, her hands clawing at the air. "It is fake!" she shrieked. Her face contorted into a mask of pure panic. "He edited it. He is using AI. You can do anything with computers now. He is trying to frame me." She turned to her sister, my Aunt Linda, pleading with wild eyes. "Linda, you know me. You know I would never steal from my own daughter. Tell them he is lying." Ethan did not flinch. He simply looked at the crowd. "We have the metadata for every file," he said calmly. "We have the IP addresses. We have the original bank logs. This is not AI. Marla, this is arithmetic." And that was when the dam broke. It was not the documents that broke it. It was the audacity of her denial. A chair scraped loudly against the parquet floor. It came from table 4, the table reserved for close family. Aunt Linda stood up. She was trembling. She looked at the screen, then at me, and finally at Marla. Her face was not angry. It was crushed. "Marla," Linda said, her voice shaking, "3 years ago, you told me Lucy was being evicted." Marla froze. She stopped screaming. She looked at her sister with the eyes of a trapped animal. "You called me in the middle of the night," Linda continued, her voice rising. "You said Lucy had lost her job and was going to be on the street. You said she was too proud to ask for help. You asked me for $2,000 to pay her landlord." I stared at my aunt, stunned. I had never been evicted. I had never lost my job. I had never even been late on rent. "I gave you the money," Linda said, tears starting to stream down her face. "I took it out of my retirement account. You said you gave it to her. I never saw a penny." "Aunt Linda," I whispered, though in the silence, everyone heard me. Linda put a hand to her mouth, a sob escaping her throat. She looked at Marla with a mixture of horror and realization. "You kept it," she choked out. "You took my money and you blamed it on Lucy. You made me think my niece was a failure so you could buy what? A new purse? A trip?" Marla opened her mouth to argue, but she was cut off. Another chair scraped back. This time it was my cousin, Mike. He was standing at table 6, his face red with fury. "The car," Mike said. He was looking at Marla with pure disgust. "When I sold you my old sedan for Lucy, you said she needed a car for work but could not afford the market rate. I sold it to you for $500, practically a gift." He looked at me. "I never got a car." "Mike," I said softly. "I know," Mike said, his fists clenching on the tablecloth. "Because I saw you taking the bus for 3 years. I thought you sold it. I thought you took my gift and sold it for cash because you were irresponsible." That is what Marla told me. She said, "See? You cannot help her. She just cashes out." He turned to Marla, pointing a finger that shook with rage. "You sold it, didn't you? You took the car for $500 and flipped it. And you let me despise my cousin for 5 years. The room was unraveling. The illusion of the saintly mother was dissolving, revealing the intricate web of lies she had spun to keep herself fed and everyone else divided. It was a domino effect of trauma. A woman from the church group stood up. She was crying. "The rehab fund." She whispered, "Marla, you collected donations. You said Lucy was in trouble with substances." My jaw dropped. I had never touched a drug in my life. I barely drank wine. "We gave you $1,200, the woman said, clutching her handbag to her chest. "We prayed for her. We prayed for her soul." "And you were just eating lunch on our money?" The sound of weeping began to fill the room. It was not the happy tears of a wedding. It was the sound of a collective heartbreaking. These people had not just been tricked out of money. They had been tricked out of their love for me. They had been manipulated into pitying me, judging me, and fearing for me, all while funding Marla's lifestyle. Ethan stood by the projector, silent now. He did not need to say another word. The data had done its job. The truth was infectious. Marla looked around the room, her head whipping back and forth. She saw the faces of her friends, her family, her neighbors. She saw the disgust. She saw the pity. and for the first time in her life, she saw that her narrative had no power. She looked at me. "Lucy," she pleaded, her voice a broken whisper. Tell them I love you. Tell them I did it for us." I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I looked at the woman who had stolen my grandmother's legacy, who had ruined my credit, who had turned my family against me, who had stood on this stage 5 minutes ago and tried to destroy my marriage. And I felt nothing. I did not feel hate. I did not feel anger. I felt the profound, hollow distance of looking at a stranger. "I cannot help you." "Mom," I said. The first person to leave was Aunt Linda. She could not bear to look at Marla. She grabbed her purse, her face buried in a napkin, and walked out the double doors, sobbing. Then Mike followed, kicking a chair out of his way as he stormed out, unable to contain his anger. Then the woman from the church group, then a neighbor who realized why her jewelry had gone missing years ago when Marla had a key. Then my father's old business partner, who looked at me with an expression of profound apology before turning his back on Marla. One by one, 6 people stood up and walked out of the reception. They did not leave because they were bored. They left because the air in the room had become unbreathable with the stench of betrayal. They left because they realized that every kindness they had extended to Marla had been weaponized against her own daughter. Marla stood alone on the stage, the microphone hanging uselessly in her hand. The projector screen still glowed behind her, illuminating the receipts of her deception. I felt a hand on my waist. Ethan, he was back at my side. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He just stood there, a solid wall between me and the wreckage. "We are done here," he said softly to me. I looked at my mother one last time. She looked small. She looked shrunken in her expensive dress. She was not the monster under the bed anymore. She was just a sad, greedy woman who had overplayed her hand. I turned my back on her. I turned toward my husband, and for the first time in 32 years, I did not look back to see if she was watching. 3 days after the wedding, the air in the conference room of Northbridge Legal and Mediation Group was cold enough to preserve meat. The mahogany table was long and polished, reflecting the fluorescent lights above. On one side sat Marla and a lawyer who looked like he regretted taking the case the moment he saw the file. On the other side sat Ethan and me, our attorney. A sharp woman named Ms. Vance laid out the situation with brutal efficiency. "We have admitted forgery of a legal document regarding the insurance payout," Ms. Vance stated, sliding a paper across the table. "We have admitted unauthorized opening of credit accounts. We have admitted to impersonating the client to utility companies. This is not a civil dispute. Mrs. Howard, this is a checklist for a felony indictment." Marla did not look at me. She stared at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than she had at the wedding. The grandeur was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful silence. She was not sorry she had done it. She was sorry she had been caught. As part of the preliminary discovery, Marla had been forced to turn over a box of documents she had kept in her home safe, papers she claimed were relevant to my financial guardianship. Ms. Vance began sifting through them, cataloging receipts and bank statements. Then, she stopped. She pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope. It had been opened, the seal broken years ago. On the front, in handwriting that made my heart stop, were the words, "To Lucy, for her future." It was my grandmother's handwriting. Ms. Vance handed it to me. My hands trembled as I pulled out the letter inside. It was dated 2 weeks before my grandmother died. "My dearest Lucy, I am leaving this check for $5,000 directly to you. I know your mother worries about money, but I also know you are the one with the good head on your shoulders. You saved every penny from your summer job. You are the responsible one, even if Marla does not say it. Use this to start your life. Do not let anyone tell you that you cannot handle it." I read the words 3 times. "You are the responsible one for my entire adult life." Marla had told me I was reckless. She had told me I was incapable. She had built a cage out of those words and locked me inside it. And all along, She had hidden the key, this letter, in her safe. She had stolen the money. Yes, but the theft of the money was nothing compared to the theft of my confidence. She had intercepted a message from the grave just to keep me thinking I was broken. I looked up at Marla. She saw the letter in my hand. She did not flinch. "I was going to give it to you when you were ready," she muttered. "You were too young. You would have spent it on clothes." Ethan made a sound in his throat, a low growl of disgust. "We are done negotiating," Ethan said. "We want full repayment of the insurance money, the unauthorized credit debt cleared, and the money from this check adjusted for inflation." Marla's lawyer leaned over to whisper to her. Marla shook her head aggressively. Then, she did something that severed the last thread of attachment I had to her. She did not look at me. She looked at Ethan. She leaned across the table, her eyes narrowing into a bargaining squint. "Look, Ethan," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let us be reasonable. Lawyers are expensive. If you drop the fraud charges and the restraining order, I will pay back half, 50-50. We keep it in the family. Lucy does not need all of it right now anyway." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy weight finally vanishing. She was trying to cut a deal with my husband to rip me off one last time. She did not see a daughter sitting across from her. She saw a mark. She saw a liability to be managed. There was no love there. There was only possession. I reached out and placed my hand on Ethan's arm to silence him. "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room. Marla looked at me, surprised that I had spoken. "No deal?" I said. "You will pay back every cent. You will sign the admission of guilt so the credit bureaus can clear my name. And you will sign a permanent no-contact order if you ever come near my house, my job, or my husband again. We will file the criminal charges immediately." "But Lucy," Marla started to wail, pivoting back to the victim role. "I am your mother. You cannot cut me out. Who will help you?" I held up the letter from my grandmother. "I do not need your help," I said. I never did. The mediation took another hour, but the fight was over. Marla signed the papers. She wrote the check from her retirement savings, her hands shaking with rage. She signed the order banning her from contacting us. When she left the office, she did not look back. She walked out alone, a woman who had traded her family for control and ended up with neither. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my mother was replaced by a different kind of noise. My phone began to ping with messages from the people who had walked out of the wedding. Aunt Linda sent me a long email. She apologized for believing the lies about the eviction. She told me she had cut ties with Marla and wanted to take me to lunch to get to know the niece she had missed out on. Cousin Mike sent a text. "I am sorry I was a jerk about the car. I should have asked you directly. You are a lot tougher than I thought." The woman from the church group sent a card with a check inside, returning the donation she had given Marla, saying she wanted it to go to the person it was actually intended for. One by one, the 6 people who had left the room in tears reached out to mend the bridge my mother had burned. I did not feel triumphant when I read their messages. I did not feel a surge of victory. I just felt light. It was the relief of finally being able to stand in the sunlight without a shadow looming over me. On our 1-month anniversary, Ethan and I finally finished unpacking in our new house. The walls were fresh and clean. We had one last box to empty. Ethan pulled out a framed photograph. It was from the wedding. It was not the posed portrait of us by the altar. It was a candid shot the photographer had taken during the speech. It was the moment the screen had lit up with the truth. I was standing there, looking terrified, but Ethan was holding my hand. His face was set in that calm, protective line, and his grip was visible even in the photo. I took the picture from him. "Let us hang this one," I said. Ethan looked at it and smiled. "Not the one of the kiss?" "No," I said, driving a nail into the wall of the hallway. "This is the real one. This is what love is." I hung the frame and stepped back. "It is easy to love someone when everything is perfect," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "But you loved me when I was a mess. You stood next to me when the truth exploded." Ethan wrapped his arm around my waist and kissed my temple. "You were never a mess." "Lucy," he said, "you were just under construction. And now, the building is finished." I looked at the photo one last time. The woman in the picture looked scared. Yes, but she also looked free, and for the first time in 32 years, I knew exactly who she was. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that the truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how much it hurts. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how Ethan handled the situation. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, hitting that like button, and hit the notification bell so more people can hear this story. Stay strong, and never let anyone write your narrative for you.